Movie villains. They used to be bad, which was good, but now they tend to be good, which is bad. That is to say, they used to be bad people doing bad things, which was good for audiences, because audiences love to hate bad guys. But now they tend to be good people doing bad things because they were led astray. They're misguided, and that's kind of bad for audiences, because it's not really fun to love to hate someone who's, been led astray. So, can we please just make movie villains bad again? For good. It wasn't too long ago that you could count on a James Bond villain being bad. And why were they bad? Because they just were. And no one cared why. In Goldfinger, Auric Goldfinger literally wants to blow up an atomic bomb at Fort Knox just to increase the value of his own gold. That's it. Kill God knows how many people just to make your gold worth more money. That's pretty evil. And you know what? There's no origin story or backstory given for why he wants to do any of this. We don't get some story about how when he was a kid, some kid attacked him with gold bars or something. I don't know. We don't get anything like that. And we don't care. We don't want to know why Goldfinger's bad. We just love that he is. Now, I'm not talking about classic drama here. I'm not talking about three-dimensionally drawn characters from The Godfather or The Third Man. I'm not talking about Michael Corleone or Harry Lime. I'm talking about science fiction, action-adventure, comic books, animated films, serials. I'm talking about that kind of thing. In that kind of thing, we expect our villains to just be bad people. And there's been a trend going on for a few decades now of making them three-dimensionally good people instead. If you take the earliest adaptations of Dracula, like Nosferatu, or the 1931 film Dracula that was based on the stage play that was based on the novel, the characters are just evil. They're just vampires. They're there to kill and slaughter and drink blood, and they don't really have any motivation other than they're just evil. They're vampires. When Dracula is struck down at the end of the movie, no one's weeping tears of sadness for him. He was a vampire. But fast forward ahead to Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, and suddenly Dracula's a very deep character indeed. The main thing is that he lost his love. And when he did that, he turned against God and rammed his sword into a cross. God turned him into a vampire. And then he discovered his lost love was in London, Carfax Abbey. Then he goes to find her and he falls in love again. And point is, he's not really scary because we understand that he's actually a sad character. I would have just preferred him to be a monstrous vampire, I guess is what I'm saying. Now, the thing that really got all of this rolling in the modern age was the Star Wars trilogy that George Lucas did. Now, this was a great trilogy, and for the first two movies of Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader was absolutely one of the greatest movie villains of all time. That guy was just plain evil. He choked people with the Force just to show off how strong he was. He was not someone that you would ever think had a good, noble heart inside of him. But then came Return of the Jedi, and well, yeah, he was just a good guy who was led astray, and he turned good again in the end, and he was redeemed, and we all got to see him with Obi-Wan and Yoda. And somehow he even became younger again with the two of them later on. And you're talking about a movie trilogy that was the most popular thing anyone had ever seen in the movies up to that point. So it made sense that it got into a lot of people's heads, hey, what if we start making our bad characters good too? Fortunately, the first two Superman movies came out before Return of the Jedi, and I'm forever grateful for that. Because in those two movies, directed by Richard Donner, and the second one directed by Richard Donner and Richard Lester, who ended up getting the majority screen credit, even though it's much more Donner's film than Lester's, but that's a story for another day. In those two movies, the character of Lex Luthor is portrayed deliciously and brilliantly by Gene Hackman as just pure evil. Lex Luthor wants to blow up nuclear weapons to increase his real estate value. That's it. Like kill millions of people just to make his property have a better land value. He and Goldfinger would have been really good friends in real life. There's not one moment in either of those first two Superman movies where Lex Luthor is taken aback by his own evil. There is no origin story present in the movies of Superman or Superman 2 for Lex Luthor, and that's great because we don't need one and we don't want one. But origin stories for other characters became kind of a thing. Now, two of the biggest and worst examples I can think of this are for two of the greatest female characters in movie history. The first one I'd like to talk about is Cruella de Vil. She's evil. I mean, it's right there in her name. She's a cruel devil. She's Cruella de Vil. Anyway, the character in both the book it was based on and in the animated film wants to skin puppies for their fur. That's pretty evil. It's hard to get a good person out of that. And yet, in the origin story movie Cruella, man, they somehow managed it. They did it. They got a good person out of that. She has a whole origin story in which it turns out she's the one that's been cruelly wronged. And she wins in the end over the evil person. Spoiler, it was her mother. And then even gives as a gift to the dearly darlings the Dalmatians that would become the basis for the 101 Dalmatians. That's right, she doesn't even seem to have anything against the dogs. Nor is anything present in the origin story film that indicates that she will one day be a maniacal lunatic intent on getting fur no matter what the cost or cruelty to any animal on Earth. Perfect origin story. Good job. The next one is the character of the Wicked Witch of the West, one of the greatest villains of all time. And again, because there was no origin story, that's what made her such a great villain. She was just wicked. She was wicked. Where have I heard that before? Oh yeah. So, in 1995, Gregory Maguire wrote the novel Wicked. Now, okay, there is a little bit of a difference here. He wasn't writing it as an origin story. So, if you're thinking that, he's already off the hook. He was writing it as an alternate story. In other words, he was taking the characters from the L. Frank Baum books and then writing his own story using those characters. So, the 1939 film matches up fairly closely to the book. There's a few changes. For instance, there's two good witches in the book. The Good Witch of the North, which is not Glinda. And then at the end of the book, she meets the Good Witch of the South, which is Glinda. There's a couple of changes like that. But for the most part, it tracks with the book. Whereas Wicked just takes the characters and creates its own story. Now, again, Gregory Maguire is off the hook here because his intention was to explore what happens if a good person can be kind of forced into being a bad person. So this one kind of gets a pass. Regardless of that, the character of the Wicked Witch of the West is now generally viewed as this good person gone bad, because Wicked has become so popular that most people think the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz is the Wicked Witch portrayed in Wicked. It's not really the same, but it's also still defanged, one of the great movie villains of all time by association. Is there a chance that we can escape this weird trend of making movie villains good? I don't know, because even in some of the biggest blockbusters we have seen in the last couple of decades, movie villains tend to be better than we'd think they would be. Even Thanos in the MCU did what he did for good intentions. He was actually trying to make the universe a more just and equitable place by wiping out half the population. Sure, it's a bad thing to do and could absolutely be considered evil, but they make it a point to give Thanos a justification for it, to make him kind of a peace-loving character in the end. There can still be great movie villains, and there can still be great villains who are bad just for the sake of being bad. But we seem to have fallen into a trap where everybody has to have some kind of motivation for their being bad instead of just, they're bad. Look, I don't really care why Goldfinger's bad. I don't care why Dracula's bad. I don't care why Cruella de Vil's bad. I don't care why the Wicked Witch of the West is bad. And before Return of the Jedi, I certainly didn't care why Darth Vader was bad. I just liked them because they were bad. And I'd like to go back to that, if we can, for good. That's all I got for now. As always, unlike Cruella de Vil, drive safely.